Okay, so we are live for this week's episode of Startup Weekly. And this week I'm joined by Kelly Wittman, who is the founder and owner of Witt and Company, a design studio focusing on brand strategy for service providers, coaches, and consultants. So Kelly, very welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. So thanks for joining. So maybe just to go by way of introduction, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your own background and maybe how you came to specialize in brand strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a more non-traditional entrepreneurial startup. In the sense that I didn't know really what entrepreneurship was or wasn't quite aware of it when I was going through college. So I went to school for advertising and marketing. And my background is in the nonprofit space. So doing marketing and fundraising and grant writing for local nonprofits. And through about maybe 5 years ago, my husband and I bought our first house and we started a home renovation blog. And through connections that I had made with other bloggers, there was this struggle with marketing. And that was ironically my background. So I started doing marketing services and offering marketing services to other bloggers, specifically in the social media space. So managing their Facebook and their Pinterest and Instagram, things like that. And Witt and Company was born from that. So we started as offering digital marketing services and more of virtual assistant type work. And I had a connection and a friend that I had met through my nonprofit space said that she had reached out and her husband was wanting to start this salsa company and they needed help with their branding and their marketing for this new company. And I jumped at the chance because I've always been interested in branding and loved the idea of graphic design. I dabbled with that in the nonprofit space. We wear a lot of hats. Similar to the startup world, you kind of do it all. And so I helped them with their logo design and their brand collateral, things like that. Absolutely fell in love with the process and realized that's what I want to do. And then from there, I just started digging into the branding side and learning as much as I can about branding and brand strategy and designing. And the rest is history, as they say.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like there was kind of like a natural evolution there with some of the early stuff that you did around, let's say, social media implementation to building it into what is now, let's say, a brand strategy offering. So would that be fair to say? I mean, like, because I think it's something a lot of people worry about in the early stages is trying to actually formulate a product and service offering that is bespoke, but also kind of complete for potential clients. And I think oftentimes people get hung up about trying to get it perfect from the start, but there is an evolution and there is a process that happens to work towards getting something that's right for you and right for your clients.
100%. It's definitely an evolutionary process. And that's something that I really hone in with my clients as we're working together. I take the approach to your brand and your brand strategy that it starts with taking action. You're not going to know anything by writing it on paper or spending countless hours of doing that brainstorming work. You understand in your brand and your business, it evolves as you take action and as you are out there doing the thing. There's absolutely no way that I would have known or that I could have known when I first started doing digital marketing that I would know or lead to doing branding. Some things you just don't know until you get in there and start doing the work. And the other thing that I think was really helpful is following the breadcrumbs and really tuning into what you are enjoying and not questioning that in the sense that yes, I didn't go to school for branding. So there was a lot of that mindset of, oh, can I do this? But it was something that I really enjoyed. So I just wanted to follow that, like what was feeling good in the moment. And okay, let's take that next right step and then see where that goes. And kind of understanding that this was a journey rather than getting to a specific destination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think you've explained it nicely. I also think that something a lot of people, I don't want to say struggle with again, but something a lot of people try to do is translate, I guess, similarities they're seeing between different clients and build that into their offering over time. And I think what you
Right.
probably did was you saw some patterns with the clients that you're working with and probably ended up translating that into your brand strategy offering.
Hmm.
Would that be fair to say? And is
Yeah.
that something that like you consciously did, or did it kind of evolve as you were learning with new clients?
A little bit of both. So, as I was educating myself on brand strategy, a big piece that I kept coming up with, and I knew just internally that was important, was identifying who you wanted to serve. So, who was that person? Who is that ideal client, that perfect for you person that really lights you up? So, as that education came in, I was more intentional about identifying who that person was. And specifically, just to give maybe some tangibles, I ask specific questions in my onboarding and offboarding process around like why is right now the time to invest in your brand and business? What are you hoping to gain from this? So I can get their language and be more intentional about marketing myself to that person. But then also looking at doing the work and realizing what isn't fitting. So there were some services, like I realized right away that I'm not a fan of Instagram. So offering Instagram services when I was doing digital marketing, even back in 3.5, 4 years ago, wasn't a good fit. So it was kind of a combination, if you will, of taking action, working with clients and realizing, following what felt good, but then also taking the education that I was learning about branding and brand strategy and working that into my process to get more clear on who I wanted to serve and who I wanted to show up for.
Yeah, cool. So touching on what you mentioned last there, the type of people that you want to serve and show up for, who is your kind of typical ideal client, and who do you see coming to you for like getting ahead in brand strategy?
Yeah, great question. So I really love working with people who are passionate about what they're doing because they know that they want to make a positive impact on their space. Like it doesn't have to be the world, it's just their community or their industry, their category, wherever they're in and they're operating in. They have this vision and they need help bringing it to life. So what I love doing when working with clients is taking all of their ideas and their inspiration and the thoughts that are going through their head and distilling it down into a clear communication plan for their brand, from the messaging all the way then to your visuals, like what you think of normally when we think of brand, which is like the logo and the fonts and the colors and things like that, and helping them pull all of this together into a plan for bringing that passion to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So another interesting point I think is like you mentioned, what do people think about when they hear the word brand? And for a lot of people, it can mean different things. And I think
Yes.
for a lot of people, it's also something that's quite intangible, and it's hard to put your finger on the essence of why certain brands resonate with you as an individual, and then why certain brands have got such a large foothold in the collective psyche, maybe. So what's your definition of what a brand is, coming from a
Yeah,
brand
such a loaded
strategist?
question.
Yeah.
But for me, I think about a brand as how people think and feel and act in relation to your business.
Sure.
And then when we talk about brand strategy, which can be also this other ambiguous idea, that's how you get someone to think a certain way, how you influence their thoughts and their feelings and their actions, is with and being intentional and strategic about your communication plan and taking, who do you want to serve and different foundational elements that go into creating a brand and being intentional about them, and then communicating them a certain way, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And you reminded me of something I read recently. And I think it was along the lines of, as humans, we make decisions based on our emotions, and then we try to
Yeah.
justify them based on logic after the fact. But the
Yeah.
actual decision in the moment is often made by something that we're feeling or an emotion that's evoked because of something that's been presented to us. And that probably comes back to the heart of what you spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes, especially if I'm working with someone who is newer in the space, and they haven't been exposed necessarily to more of that broad definition of a brand. As I mentioned before, I think most of the time we think of that logo. And what is not always understood is how can this logo evoke such a certain emotion. Thinking about your favorite brands, if you see the logo, you have certain thoughts, you have certain feelings, and you want to take certain actions when you experience a touch point that brand is having you experience.
Mm-hmm.
What we don't think about is all of the work that goes on behind the scenes that you can't see to get you to and influence you to feel a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
to think a certain way, to take a certain action. And that's when we think about, like to explain, when a brand is doing it well, you don't think about that because you can just see the logo, or you just see, scrolling through Instagram and you see their caption come up or a picture that comes up and you automatically think, oh, that looks like so-and-so. There's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes to get you to think that way or feel that way or take a certain action.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that I'm learning as we're building Startup Sanctuary as well. But I think I'm someone who at least is trying to put a large emphasis on our brand and building the brand around it. But how do you justify or explain the importance of branding to others and to clients? I mean, I'm guessing a lot of the clients that come to you are looking for help with their branding, and maybe they realize that they're lacking in that area. Or is it and do you find yourself having to justify it to them, or are they identifying it themselves and saying, look, Kelly, we know we're lacking here, we need some help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say most of the time, if someone's seeking me out, they're already in a space where they know that they need help. And most of the time, I would say about 99% of the time, it's one of two reasons. The first one is they come to me and they say, I've worked with other designers, or I've tried to DIY my brand, which is fine. Maybe I bought a logo on Etsy or 99 Designs, and it doesn't feel right. That's mostly what people will say when they come to me. Or versus they're just getting started, they have this clear vision and they need help bringing it to life. So I think when it comes to, from that perspective, the understanding of the benefit is already there. But to really answer your question, if someone is unsure, if you're ready for branding, or if you don't know if it's worth the investment, I would go back to what I was saying before. Brand has the power to really influence, when it's done well, has the power to influence your ideal client's thoughts and actions and the way that they experience your brand. So if you're in this space where you're struggling with connecting with your ideal client, really you don't know how to talk about your services or what you do in a way that is intentional or strategic or helpful to that person, or maybe you were the person who was DIYing, or you bought a logo and it still isn't fitting right. Those are usually the flags that will go up, and those are kind of the notices where, okay, maybe it is time to invest some energy and attention to my branding.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole host of especially startups. I think that probably they don't put brand at the forefront of what they're doing, and are mostly focused on building the actual product itself. So it's very interesting that you say that, and it's probably at a point where these businesses begin to reach a traction point, or where they're starting to scale, that they only then realize, okay, we need to start putting some effort into our branding.
100%. The last full-time position that I had before I went full-time into my business was with a local startup here, and they were a software as a service company. And the biggest thing, I guess, that I saw that was lacking, and that where it could have had, or we could have had more clarity, was that they weren't putting the same energy into understanding their brand strategy, specifically who they wanted to go after. With them, they were, the team was a ton of amazing software developers. So there was literally no limit to what we could do with this specific tool. But where the downside comes is then you lack the clarity and you get into that, shiny object syndrome, because you think, oh, this client over here asked for this functionality on the software. Let's just throw it in. This client over here asked for this functionality. Let's throw it in. And before you know it, you're trying to serve all of these different people with this software that lost the integrity of what it had when you first started. So the benefit of having clarity on your brand when you're just getting started is it helps you with that shiny object syndrome, because you are clear on who you're serving, who you're for, why you're doing what you're doing, what's the value, what is the solution that you're providing, and you can have that laser beam focus to stick to one thing for the duration or a certain duration of time, to really help you flesh out whether or not this idea is worth pursuing, or it's you're on the right track, rather than trying to pull together all of these different things from a variety of different clients, because you're trying to serve everyone rather than that one specific target.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of trends are you seeing maybe in the more macro climate around brand strategy from someone who's maybe immersed in that space? I think particularly online and digital at the moment is, I don't know, I think people and brands are having to communicate differently in light of like the economic climate and things that are just going on in the world. So do you have any kind of perspectives or things that you see going on, and maybe are you trying to position yourself and brands that you help to capitalize on them?
Yeah, the thing that I'm seeing, and what I'm leading my clients and talking to my clients about, is getting really clear on what they want to be known for, and staying focused on that, and that it's okay to have giving permission of it's okay to have a very narrow focus. And then from a marketing perspective, I think we're bombarded, especially in this pandemic time, with so many different messages on so many different platforms, that I really am encouraging, and I'm doing this in my own business, to find marketing strategies that work for you, that fit with your lifestyle, and fit with how you want to utilize your brand to help shape your business, for your life, rather than trying to be everywhere and to everybody and show up always everywhere, like I just said, and really focusing in on maybe one specific channel, and then honing in on that one message and getting really great on one thing, rather than trying to do it all, just because we're in such an exceptionally noisy space in this digital entrepreneurship world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just been such an elevated amount of, you say noise, but yeah, it's just a huge amount more content and people interacting online for meetings, for organizations, and leveraging technology to portray themselves and their brands. But I guess coming back to maybe what people can and should be doing, do you have any kind of ideas or things that entrepreneurs maybe in their early stage that they should be doing to kind of cultivate that initial brand identity for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the best place to start is I always recommend doing a brand audit. So we think about our brand as this experience, right? And there's various touch points that someone can have with your brand, and whether it's they see you on their website, or they interact with you on social media, or they meet you at a networking event, or whatever the case may be. Looking at those different touch points and understanding, is it clear who you serve? Is it clear the solution that you're providing? Is it clear how you want people to feel when they interact and experience your brand? And is it clear why you're doing what you're doing? I think those 4 pieces, which are, when we think about storytelling, and story is a big component of branding, you have the basics of who, how, what, and why. So making sure you cover those, and that it's clear in every touch point what those are. And sometimes what I recommend to clients is having maybe a friend go through those, go through your website, go through your social media, and see if they can answer those questions. If they can't, then that, okay, what can't they answer? That's a really great place to start and make sure that we're clearly communicating that particular story piece.
Yeah, that's a great action item that I think is very easy for someone to go and do, straight away.
Yeah,
Just get a handful of people or friends to give that feedback and answer those simple questions to make sure that in their mind they can understand what you're offering as a product and service.
right.
Yeah, and I think coming back to, I guess, the way that we kind of look at a startup sanctuary as well is like there's a huge amount of people starting businesses around their own personal brands and their own passions. And I think
Yeah,
as the internet evolves and as more people are able to do that, there's obviously the whole area of like personal branding versus branding for a business or a company.
yeah.
So do you, maybe first of all, do you work with anybody on like a personal branding level? Maybe you have clients like that. And how do you differentiate between both of them? And are there ways that you kind of strategically go about helping people to position themselves in either one?
Yeah, that's such a great question and so common.
Mm-hmm.
So most of my clients are as service providers, they're selling them their expertise, whether they most of them have small teams, but
Sure.
they're still essentially the face of their brand. And there's this idea or the question similar to what you had of, how much personality do we bring into our
Mm-hmm.
brand? And so let's first dive into this idea of personal branding versus business branding. My opinion is that branding should be personal,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whether or not you have a business at the front or if your face is at the front of your brand.
Mm-hmm.
It still should be personal because even if you're a B2B, you're still connecting to a human. You're not talking to that other business. You're talking to another human who's on behalf of that business.
Sure.
So I always recommend to bring in that human element into your brand. That's why one of the questions when we talk about, doing that brand audit is how do you want people to feel? It's a very human question because that's where people buy from. As we talked about, people buy from an emotional place. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to, regardless of whether you're a business or you're a personal brand, you want to get people to feel a certain way about what you do and your brand. And then to carry on or to respond to that other question about how much then personality do you bring in? Let's say you are a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I go back to how do you want people to feel when they experience your brand and what characteristics and personality traits that you have can you bring to the table that will help to embody and influence that type of feeling. When we think about being vulnerable is like a
Mm-hmm.
common thing that people talk about, especially when it comes to a vulnerable or a personal brand of, yes, it's great to be vulnerable. It's how you build connection. But I would have you think through, does that align with how you want people to feel
Yeah.
and why you're doing what you're doing? So when you have clarity as well around the rest of those brand strategy and story elements,
Mm-hmm.
it helps you decide or decipher how much of your personality should you bring in that makes sense for who you're serving, why you're doing what you're doing, how you want them to feel, and what you're providing as a solution.
Yeah, it's a great answer. A lengthy one, but a good one. I think for a lot of people as well, it will, like you said, it depends on how much of themselves they want to bring to, let's say, their brand as a business. And if it is a service that they're providing, there is I think a delineation between like your personality and a brand and how much of the personality you want to bring to it,
Mm-hmm.
to align with your business values. But yeah, that's a great answer. Um, the next thing I wanted to ask was just around branding and growth, because I think oftentimes, like we mentioned, people associate branding with being the less tangible component of marketing. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on ways of measuring a return on investments with effort gone into branding, or how do you think about that side of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I I think when you have brand clarity
Mm-hmm.
around, let's just use this communication. So if you understand how you want to communicate and you're consistent
Mm-hmm.
with how you're communicating, it makes growth a lot easier
Mm-hmm.
because you're not stuck, going back to that example of the startup that I was talking about, you're not falling into necessarily or as easily falling into that shiny object path because you're clear on the direction that you're heading. That's what branding and good branding and understanding what your brand is can do for your business. It makes the path to growth a lot less bumpy. I mean, you're still going to have those
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a roller coaster ride, of course, but if you have clarity, if you have that North Star of understanding this is what my brand is standing for, this is what I'm working towards, you can then create clear, measurable steps. So for example, if you know, like, this is the solution that you're providing, these are who you're targeting, you can then measure, okay, are you getting this leads? Are the leads that are coming in, are they aligned with who you really want to serve? If they're not, then you can go back to your brand, that strategy, and really understand how are you communicating, and if you're not getting the right people coming in, should you be changing up your messaging, or if the right people are coming in but they want a different solution, how are you communicating that solution that you're providing? Is there anything you can do to change that up? So when we think about measurables, I think they're the same. I mean, you can use those same KPIs about lead generation and revenue and much is your email list growing. But if the numbers aren't there, for me, that's always an indicator of, okay, what's going on with my communication plan for my brand and where am I falling short?
Yeah, I think that's it's another great way to think about it, because you're looking at the inbound stuff that's coming back in from the branding efforts that you've gone out doing. And I think that's the best measure of it, is the people that are actually coming in who are resonating with what you're putting out from a communication standpoint, but also ultimately you're having the final say on whether that type of client is aligned with the type of work you want to do, and if they're a good fit for you to work with as well,
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that shifts then. I mean, maybe you're getting a lot of people, you're targeting group A, but group B is coming in and you're realizing that they're actually a better fit. That's great. And again, this goes back to building your business and your brand happens when you take action, and it's experimental, right? So you put out some messaging, maybe you do some ads, Facebook ads on social media, and you realize, okay, who's biting on this? Is this a good fit? Okay, then we can go back to that brand strategy and maybe alter it a little bit to dependent on what results we're getting, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kelly, how are you thinking about growing and scaling your own business? I'm actually not sure how old your business is, but I think you've been doing it for a number of years now, like you said, with the journey of going from serving some clients social media stuff to growing into this brand strategy boutique. So what is, I guess, your own thoughts on growth and scaling yourself, or is that something that you're continuously striving to do?
It's something that's always at top of mind, especially this year. I've been a lot more strategic about it. So I've been full-time in my business for 3 years now. And this past spring, I brought on a designer who's helping me, a design associate. And I have 2 virtual assistants that do various admin tasks. I'm in this space now and how I'm thinking about branding and just business in general, of how can I take a little bit more of a step back and be more strategic in my business and still work one-on-one with clients. One of my big goals for this last quarter is to take a step back from social media and focus more of my attention on doing like outreach like this with different podcasts and focusing. I love writing. So doing more blog content and focusing, just kind of trying to find different marketing strategies that aren't primarily on social media. So that's another big part of my growth. But especially in a service-based business, there's this balance between, I love working with clients, but then I get tied to my business. So how can I kind of have the best of both worlds to have that flexibility and create a more flexible schedule while still bringing in that consistency and being able to help people one-on-one?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask that next. I was going to move on to what are what is it that you love most about what you do? And I think you've somewhat answered it in that, like, you love serving the clients, but you also love the internal operation side of your
Yeah.
business itself. And it's nice to hear that, and nice to hear the balance. But is there anything else that really stands out to you as, like, what's kind of the motivating or the driving factor for you in what you're doing?
Yeah, that's for me. I love connecting with my clients and being part of their business journey
Mm-hmm.
and helping them tell their story. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, I love working with people who are super passionate about what they do, and having the opportunity to help them bring that to life through branding and telling their story and getting clear on it, and then bringing it, doing the visuals and having that all come together. It's so much fun. And then to see them interacting with their brand and using it out in the digital world,
Mm-hmm.
is super cool. That salsa company, the very first client that I had, they are in grocery stores now here
Mm-hmm.
local in
Awesome.
Minnesota. So it's so fun to go and see like, I did their packaging and it's sitting on the shelf, and I'm helping them create this life that they want through intentional branding with
Mm-hmm.
that strategy behind it. And it's really fun. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine it is. So what, as you said earlier, there's a lot of ups and downs with entrepreneurial journeys, and it can be a roller coaster ride at times. So
Yeah.
is there any major lessons learned that you'd like to share with the building of Witt and Company over the past few years?
The biggest surprise that I've had is how much mindset plays an effect, or has an effect rather, on my
Mm-hmm.
business. And I wasn't a huge proponent of personal development before I started my business. I thought it was not for people like me, I guess. I
Mm-hmm.
don't even know who I thought it was for, but I was like, no, I don't need to do any personal development. And then I started a business and realized that working on myself, that my business only can grow as much as I do.
Mm-hmm.
So that, especially this year with the turbulence that has been 2020, I'm so happy and glad that I have taken, the last couple of years to really focus on my mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think this year would have been very different for Witt and Company if I hadn't had done the work. So just really honing in on, being mindful and doing meditation and focusing on like money mindset and things like that has been such a huge surprise in how much that affects the growth of the business.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And I'm sure that translates into the work that you're doing and the clients that you
Mhm.
ultimately, I guess, work with as well. So that's awesome. Yeah. Um, we've kind of touched on it already, but if you could, like, give one piece of advice for people or startups who are trying to put a little bit more structure on their brand strategy, and, like, they're just trying to do that very first piece of thinking about it, would you recommend just doing that exercise that you mentioned before? Or what, I guess, the number one takeaway for someone who's watching this and they say, okay, I want to go and action something on improving my brand straight away?
Yeah, the brand audit is a great place to
Mm-hmm.
start. The other thing, if you're looking for just one, is to get clear on who you're serving. Because from my perspective, everything starts with that. Understanding who is that person that you are trying to help, that you want to serve. The more clarity you can have on them, the more the better your language and your copywriting will
Mm-hmm.
be, and the captions in your Instagram and the emails that you send, because you're focusing on serving them to your best ability. And the way that
Mm-hmm.
you do that is by getting to know them. So if you want just one thing to do, I would say to spend some time and some energy getting to know the person that you want to serve.
Awesome. Fantastic. Kelly, thank you very much for joining us for the Startup Weekly this week. If people want to find out more about Witt and Company, they can visit wittandcompany.com. And I'm sure Kelly will be there to answer any questions if anyone wants to reach out. But thank you so much again for taking the time and for giving all of your insights on brand strategy.
Thanks, Gordon. This was absolutely wonderful. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.